I never imagined that a single question on Mother's Day would unravel everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my son. But that's exactly what happened when Daniel asked me, in front of the entire family gathered around our dining table, whether I'd thanked Emma for the $2,000. Let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't really start on Mother's Day. It starts 32 years ago, when I held my newborn son in my arms for the first time and promised him I would give him everything I never had. My name is Patricia, and I've spent most of my adult life working double shifts as a nurse to make sure Daniel had opportunities I could only dream of as a child growing up in a cramped apartment with 5 siblings and parents who worked themselves to exhaustion just to keep food on the table. Daniel was always brilliant. Even as a little boy, he had this intensity about him, this focus that set him apart from other kids. While his classmates were trading baseball cards, he was reading books about business and entrepreneurship. I encouraged it, of course. I saw his potential and I wanted to nurture it. Every spare dollar I had went into his education, his extracurricular activities, his college fund. I wore the same winter coat for 15 years. I drove a car that barely started on cold mornings. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. None of it mattered because I was investing in Daniel's future. When he got accepted to Princeton, I cried for 3 days straight. Happy tears, obviously. My son was going to have the kind of life I'd only seen in movies. He worked hard there, graduated top of his class, and landed a job at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan. Within 5 years, he'd made his first million. Within 10, he'd started his own hedge fund. By the time he turned 30, Daniel was the kind of success story people write articles about. I was so proud I could barely contain it. At the hospital where I worked, I'd casually mention my son's achievements to anyone who would listen. Daniel this, Daniel that. My coworkers probably got tired of hearing about him, but I couldn't help myself. He was living proof that sacrifice and hard work paid off. Then he met Emma. I'll be honest, I had reservations from the start. Not because Emma wasn't lovely, she was. Beautiful, polite, well-educated. She came from money, the kind of old family wealth that Daniel had worked so hard to achieve. Her father owned a chain of hotels across the East Coast. Her mother sat on the boards of multiple charities. Emma herself had never worked a day job in her life, having gone straight from her art history degree at Yale into curating private collections for wealthy clients, more as a hobby than a necessity. When Daniel brought her home to meet me for the first time, I tried to be welcoming. I really did. I cooked for 3 days, making all of Daniel's favorite dishes. I cleaned my small apartment until every surface gleamed. I wanted to make a good impression, to show her that even though I didn't come from money, I had values and dignity and love to offer. Emma was gracious enough during that first visit. She complimented my cooking, asked polite questions about my work, admired the few family photos I had displayed on the mantel. But I could sense a distance there, a sort of careful politeness that felt more like tolerance than genuine warmth. When she looked around my modest living room with its secondhand furniture and outdated decor, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not quite judgment, but close enough to make me uncomfortable. They got engaged 6 months later. Daniel called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice bubbling with excitement. Daniel. Mom, I did it. I asked Emma to marry me, and she said yes. Patricia. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. And I was happy. I wanted my son to be happy. But there was also this small, nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that I couldn't quite name. The wedding planning process made that feeling grow larger. Emma's mother, Constance, took charge of everything, and I mean everything. The venue, the flowers, the menu, the guest list. I was consulted on exactly nothing. When I tentatively asked Daniel if I could help with any of the planning, he told me not to worry about it, that Constance had it all under control. Daniel, you've done so much for me already, Mom. Just relax and enjoy being mother of the groom. But I didn't feel like mother of the groom. I felt like a spectator. The wedding itself was held at one of Emma's father's hotels, a sprawling estate in Connecticut with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could hold 300 people. I wore a dress I'd saved up for months to buy, and I still felt underdressed compared to Emma's family and their friends, who moved through the event in designer gowns and tailored suits, discussing their vacation homes in the Hamptons and their recent trips to Europe. During the reception, I barely saw Daniel. He was constantly surrounded by Emma's relatives and their business associates, networking and laughing at jokes I wasn't close enough to hear. I sat at my assigned table with a few of my fellow nurses from the hospital who'd been kind enough to come, and we made small talk while watching my son celebrate the biggest day of his life with people who inhabited a world I'd never be part of. That was 3 years ago. In the time since, I've seen my son maybe once every few months. He's busy, I understand that. Running a successful hedge fund takes time and energy. He and Emma live in a penthouse apartment in Manhattan with views of Central Park. I've been there twice. Both times, I felt like I needed to take off my shoes at the door even though Emma insisted it wasn't necessary. Everything in their home was so white, so pristine, so expensive looking, that I was afraid to touch anything. Emma was always polite to me, always. She never said an unkind word, never treated me with anything but courtesy. But there was this invisible wall between us that neither of us acknowledged. She'd ask about my work with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd thank me for the birthday and Christmas gifts I sent, modest things compared to what she was used to, with a graciousness that somehow made me feel smaller. When I suggested getting together for lunch, just the two of us, she'd agree enthusiastically, and then something would always come up. A gallery opening she'd forgotten about, a charity luncheon she couldn't miss, a last-minute trip to visit her parents. I tried to talk to Daniel about it once, carefully, not wanting to sound like I was criticizing his wife. Patricia. Sweetheart, I feel like I barely see you anymore. I miss you. Daniel. I know, Mom, I'm sorry. Things are just crazy right now, but we'll make more time, I promise. But the promises never materialized into actual visits. Our relationship increasingly existed through text messages and brief phone calls, where Daniel sounded distracted, his attention clearly divided between our conversation and whatever was happening on his computer screen. I told myself it was normal. Adult children grow up and build their own lives. That's how it's supposed to work. I should be grateful that Daniel was successful and happy. My job as a mother was done. I'd launched him into the world and he was thriving. The fact that I felt lonely and irrelevant wasn't his problem to solve. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow lost my son in the process of raising him to be successful. The little boy who used to crawl into my lap with a book and beg me to read to him one more time had become a man who scheduled me into his calendar like a business meeting and often canceled at the last minute. Then came this Mother's Day. Daniel called me 2 weeks before and invited me to brunch at their apartment. Emma would be cooking, he said. It would be just the three of us, intimate and special. I was surprised and touched. Maybe things were finally shifting. Maybe Emma was making an effort to include me more in their lives. I bought a new outfit for the occasion, something I almost never did. A soft blue dress that the saleswoman said brought out my eyes. I got my hair done at an actual salon instead of cutting it myself. I even splurged on a pedicure, though no one would see my feet in the closed-toe shoes I'd be wearing. I wanted to look put together, to show them I could be part of their world. The morning of Mother's Day, I took the train into the city, clutching a small gift bag with a scented candle I'd picked out for Emma. It seemed like the kind of thing she'd appreciate, sophisticated but not too personal. My hands were sweating on the subway, and I felt nervous in a way that seemed ridiculous. This was my son, my own child. Why did visiting him feel like a job interview? When I arrived at their building, the doorman called up to announce me, which always made me feel strange, like I needed permission to see my own family. The elevator ride up to the 23rd floor felt endless. I checked my reflection in the mirrored walls, smoothing down my hair, making sure my lipstick hadn't smudged. Emma answered the door looking effortlessly elegant in casual linen pants and a silk blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose bun. She smiled and kissed my cheek, her perfume expensive and subtle. Emma. Patricia, so wonderful to see you. Happy Mother's Day. Come in, come in. Patricia. Thank you, Emma. You look lovely. I brought you a little something. Emma. Oh, you didn't have to do that. How thoughtful. She took the gift bag and set it on the console table in the entryway without opening it. Daniel emerged from his home office, phone still in his hand, but he pocketed it when he saw me and gave me a hug. Daniel. Hey, Mom. You look great. New dress? Patricia. Yes, I wanted to look nice for today. Daniel. Well, you succeeded. Come on, let's go to the dining room. Emma's been cooking all morning. The dining room table was beautifully set with what I recognized as their wedding china and crystal glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. There were fresh flowers in the center, peonies, which Emma once mentioned were her favorite. The whole scene looked like something out of a magazine spread. We sat down and Emma brought out the food. Avocado toast with poached eggs, smoked salmon, a fruit platter arranged like a work of art, freshly squeezed orange juice, and champagne for mimosas. It was all delicious, and I told her so repeatedly, maybe too repeatedly, because I was nervous and couldn't seem to stop talking. Patricia. Emma, this is just wonderful. You're such a talented cook. This salmon is incredible, and the eggs are cooked perfectly. How do you get them so perfectly poached? Mine always fall apart in the water. Emma. Thank you, Patricia. It's really not difficult once you get the technique down. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We made small talk for a while. Daniel told me about a recent deal his fund had closed, speaking in financial jargon I didn't fully understand, but nodded along to anyway. Emma described a new artist she'd discovered whose work she was helping to promote. I talked about some of the patients I'd been caring for at the hospital, stories that felt mundane compared to their glamorous professional achievements, but they both listened politely. Then Daniel reached under his chair and pulled out a small wrapped box, setting it in front of me with a smile. Daniel. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. We got you something. I felt a rush of warmth. They'd gotten me a gift, something they'd picked out together. I carefully unwrapped the paper, trying not to tear it, and opened the box to find a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a heart. Patricia. Oh, Daniel, Emma, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. Daniel. Emma picked it out. She has great taste. Patricia. You certainly do, Emma. I love it. Thank you, both of you. I put the bracelet on immediately, admiring how it caught the light. Emma smiled and took a sip of her mimosa. Everything felt warm and perfect, exactly the kind of Mother's Day I'd been hoping for. I felt included, valued, loved. That's when Daniel asked the question that changed everything. Daniel. So, Mom, did you thank Emma for the $2,000? I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. The room suddenly felt very cold despite the sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Patricia. I'm sorry, what? Daniel. The $2,000 Emma sent you last month, for your car repairs. Did you thank her? I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. I carefully set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. Patricia. Daniel, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't received any money from Emma. Daniel looked confused. He glanced at his wife, who had gone very still, her face unreadable. Daniel. What do you mean? Emma told me she sent you money to help with your car when it broke down. $2,000. She said you called her asking for help. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Emma, who was suddenly very interested in her plate, pushing a piece of avocado around with her fork. Patricia. I never called Emma. My car did break down last month, yes, but I didn't ask anyone for money. I took on some extra shifts and paid for the repairs myself. Emma, what is he talking about? The silence that followed was excruciating. I watched Emma's face, saw the slight flush creeping up her neck, the way her jaw tightened. Daniel looked between the two of us, confusion giving way to something darker. Daniel. Emma, what's going on? Emma. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Her voice was steady, controlled, but there was an edge to it I'd never heard before. Daniel. What kind of misunderstanding? Did you send my mother money or not? Emma. I transferred money, yes, but it wasn't for her car. Daniel. Then what was it for? Emma finally looked up, meeting my eyes, and in that moment I saw something I'd never seen before. Not malice exactly, but a cold calculation that made my blood run cold. Emma. It was a loan, Patricia. You asked me for a loan and I gave it to you. I'm surprised you don't remember. It was just last month. Patricia. That's not true. I never asked you for money. I would never do that. My voice came out shakier than I wanted it to. Daniel was staring at his wife with an expression I couldn't quite read. Daniel. Emma, I need you to be completely honest right now. Did my mother ask you for money? Emma. She called me. She said she was embarrassed to ask you because she didn't want you to think she'd wasted all the money you'd given her over the years. She said her car had broken down and she couldn't afford the repairs and still pay her rent. She asked if I could help her out, just this once, and she'd pay me back. Every word was delivered with perfect, practiced calm. And every word was a complete lie. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Patricia. Daniel, I swear to you that never happened. I never called Emma. I've never asked either of you for money. Not once. Not ever. You know that. Daniel. Mom, Why would Emma lie about this? Patricia. I don't know, but I'm telling you the truth. Emma. Patricia, I understand if you're embarrassed. There's no shame in needing help. But I did give you that money, and you did promise to pay it back. I've been waiting for you to at least acknowledge it, to say thank you. When you didn't, I mentioned it to Daniel because I thought maybe you'd forgotten. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in. How do you prove something didn't happen? How do you fight against someone who's calmly, coolly insisting on a version of events that never occurred? Patricia. Emma, I am begging you to tell the truth. Please. I don't know why you're saying these things, but they're not true. Daniel. Mom, Emma has no reason to lie about this. She has her own money. Why would she make this up? Patricia. I don't know, Daniel, but I'm your mother. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever asked you or anyone else for money? Daniel. No, but maybe you were desperate and didn't want to worry me. Emma. That's exactly what you said when you called, Patricia. You said you didn't want Daniel to worry. Her voice was so sincere, so convincing. If I didn't know with absolute certainty that I'd never made that call, I might have almost believed her myself. Daniel was looking at me with something that resembled pity mixed with disappointment. And that look broke something inside me. Patricia. Show me the bank transfer. If you sent me money, there would be a record. Show me. Emma. I gave you cash. You specifically asked for cash because you didn't want there to be a paper trail. You said you didn't want Daniel finding out. Of course she'd say that. No paper trail meant no proof either way. It was brilliant and evil, and I didn't know how to fight it. Daniel. Mom, this is getting out of hand. Emma helped you out, which was generous of her. The least you can do is acknowledge it and say thank you. Patricia. I can't thank her for something that never happened. Daniel. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Just admit you asked for help. There's nothing wrong with that. I looked at my son, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, and realized he believed his wife over me. He believed a woman he'd known for 4 years over the mother who'd raised him, who'd worked double shifts to pay for his education, who'd given up everything so he could have a better life. The betrayal was so profound I could barely process it. Patricia. Daniel, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not call Emma. I did not ask her for money. I did not receive any money from her. I don't know why she's lying, but she is. And the fact that you're believing her over me tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in your life now. I stood up from the table, my legs shaking. The beautiful Mother's Day brunch suddenly looked obscene, all that expensive food on expensive plates in this expensive apartment, while my character was being assassinated over a lie. Daniel. Mom, sit down. Let's talk about this calmly. Patricia. There's nothing to talk about. You've already decided I'm lying. You've already chosen Emma's version of events over mine. Emma. Patricia, I think you're overreacting. This doesn't have to be a big deal. Patricia. Doesn't have to be a big deal. You've accused me of asking you for money and not paying it back, which makes me look like a liar and a freeloader. You've manipulated my son into doubting me. And you're sitting there acting like I'm the one being unreasonable. Daniel, don't talk to my wife like that. The words were like a slap. My own son, defending the woman who was lying about me, telling me not to talk to her in a certain way. I grabbed my purse from where I'd set it on the floor beside my chair. Patricia. I'm leaving. Thank you for the bracelet. I'm sorry your Mother's Day didn't go the way you'd planned. Daniel. Mom, come on, don't leave like this. Patricia. What do you want me to do, Daniel? Apologize for something I didn't do? Thank Emma for money I never received? Tell me, what would satisfy you? He didn't have an answer for that. Emma sat quietly, her expression perfectly composed, and I realized this was exactly what she'd wanted. Some kind of confrontation, some kind of proof that I didn't fit into their world. I just didn't understand why. I walked to the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. Daniel followed me. Daniel. Mom, please, can we just talk about this? Patricia, when you're ready to believe me, when you're ready to actually listen to your mother, you know where to find me. I left before I started crying, which I'd promised myself I wouldn't do. I held it together through the elevator ride down, through the lobby, through the 3 blocks I walked before I found a bench and finally let the tears come. People passed by, averting their eyes from the middle-aged woman sobbing on a park bench on Mother's Day. And I'd never felt more alone in my entire life. The train ride home was a blur. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to understand what had happened, why Emma would lie about something like that, why Daniel had been so quick to believe her. By the time I got back to my apartment, I felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. I called my younger sister, Rachel, the only person I felt like I could talk to about this. Rachel, hey, how was the Mother's Day brunch? Patricia, Rachel, something terrible happened. I told her everything, the words spilling out in a confused rush. Rachel listened without interrupting, which I was grateful for because I don't think I could have stopped if I'd tried. Rachel, oh my God, Patricia, that's insane. Why would she make something like that up? Patricia, I have no idea, but Daniel believed her. He actually believed her over me. Rachel, what are you going to do? Patricia, I don't know. What can I do? It's her word against mine, and apparently her word carries more weight. Rachel, have you checked your bank account? Maybe there was a deposit you missed? Patricia, there's no deposit, Rachel, because she never sent me any money, but she said it was cash, so there wouldn't be a record anyway. She thought of everything. Rachel, this feels calculated, like she wanted to create a problem between you and Daniel. Patricia, but why? What did I ever do to her? Rachel, maybe that's the point. Maybe you didn't have to do anything. Some people just don't like sharing. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Was that it? Was Emma threatened by my relationship with Daniel, limited as it had become? Did she see me as competition for his attention, his loyalty? It seemed so petty, so unnecessary. But I couldn't come up with any other explanation that made sense. The next few days were agonizing. Daniel didn't call. I didn't call him. I felt like I was in mourning for a relationship that had died without me fully realizing it was on life support. All those years of sacrifice, all those double shifts and worn-out coats and secondhand furniture, and this was where it had led. To my son believing I was a liar who mooched money from his wife and didn't even have the grace to say thank you. On the fourth day, Rachel called me back. Rachel, I've been thinking about this nonstop. There has to be a way to prove you're telling the truth. Patricia, how? She said it was cash. There's no record. Rachel, but there might be other evidence. When exactly did she say you called her? Patricia, she said last month when my car broke down. Rachel, do you still have your phone records? They'd show whether you called her or not. My heart started beating faster. Of course, phone records. Why hadn't I thought of that? Patricia, Rachel, you're brilliant. I can get those from my phone company. Rachel, and even if you did call her, which you didn't, there'd be a record of it. The lack of a call to her number proves you didn't ask her for anything. I called my phone company that afternoon and requested detailed records for the past 2 months. They said it would take a few days to process. Those days felt like the longest of my life. I barely slept, playing out scenarios in my head. Would Daniel believe the phone records? Or would Emma find some way to explain them away? When the records finally arrived in my email, I printed them out and went through them line by line. There was no call to Emma's number. Not in the past 2 months, not in the past 6 months. The only calls between us were the ones she'd made to me, brief conversations about holiday plans or to confirm details for the rare times we'd all gotten together. I had proof. Actual, concrete, undeniable proof that I hadn't called Emma to ask for money. The relief was overwhelming, but it was mixed with something darker. Anger. Not just at Emma for lying, but at Daniel for believing her so easily, for not giving me the benefit of the doubt, for choosing his wife's unverifiable story over his mother's word. I called Daniel. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious. Daniel. Hey, Mom. Patricia. I need you to come over. Today. This can't wait. Daniel. Mom, I'm at work. Can this wait until the weekend? Patricia. No, it can't. Daniel, I have proof. Proof that Emma lied. I need you to see it. There was a long pause. Daniel. What kind of proof? Patricia. Phone records. They show I never called Emma last month. I never called her to ask for money because I never asked her for money. Now please, come over after work. Bring Emma if you want. I need you to see this. Another pause longer this time. Daniel. I'll come by around 7, just me. He hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous energy, cleaning my already clean apartment, rehearsing what I'd say, trying to prepare for every possible response he might have. Part of me was terrified that even with proof, he'd find a way to rationalize Emma's lie, to make excuses for her. Daniel arrived at 7:15, still in his work suit, looking tired and tense. I let him in, and we sat at my small kitchen table, the phone records spread out between us. Patricia. Look at these. These are my phone records for the past 2 months. Look through them. There's no call to Emma's number, nothing even close to the date when my car broke down. He picked up the papers, studying them carefully. I watched his face, trying to read his expression. Confusion, then recognition, then something harder to identify. Daniel. These could be doctored. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Patricia. Doctored? Daniel, are you seriously suggesting I falsified phone records? Call the phone company yourself if you don't believe me. They'll confirm these are accurate. Daniel. Mom, there could be other explanations. Maybe you used a different phone. Maybe you blocked your number. Patricia. Listen to yourself. You're making up increasingly absurd explanations to avoid facing the truth. Your wife lied to you. She lied about me, and you believed her without question. Daniel. Why would Emma lie about something like this? What would she gain? Patricia, I don't know, Daniel. Why don't you ask her? He set the phone records down and rubbed his face with both hands. He looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work. Daniel. This doesn't make sense. Emma has never lied to me about anything. Why would she start now? Patricia. Maybe she's been lying to you all along and you just never caught her. Or maybe this is the first time. But Daniel, you need to face facts. These records prove I didn't call her, which means her entire story falls apart. Daniel. Unless she's confused about the details, maybe she sent money to someone else and got mixed up. Patricia. She knew my car broke down. She mentioned it specifically. She's not confused, Daniel. She lied, deliberately and convincingly. And you need to ask yourself why. He stood up abruptly, pacing my small kitchen. Daniel. I need to talk to her. Patricia. Yes, you do. And Daniel, I need you to really listen to what she says. Not just accept whatever explanation she gives you because it's easier than dealing with the truth. Daniel. She's my wife, Mom. I can't just accuse her of lying without giving her a chance to explain. Patricia. I'm your mother, and you accused me of lying without giving me a chance to explain. The words hung in the air between us. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at me. Really looked at me for what felt like the first time in years. Daniel. You're right, I'm sorry. I should have believed you from the start. I should have asked more questions instead of just accepting Emma's version of events. Patricia. Why didn't you? Why was it so easy to believe I'd lie to you? He sat back down, shoulders slumped. Daniel. I don't know. Maybe because Emma's never given me a reason to doubt her. And maybe because you've always been so independent, so insistent on not needing help from anyone. I guess I thought maybe you'd asked Emma because it felt less like asking me, less like admitting you couldn't handle things on your own. Patricia. Daniel, I raised you to be independent too. That doesn't mean I'm so proud that I'd lie about whether or not I asked for help. If I'd needed money, I would have asked you directly, the way I've always dealt with you. Honestly and openly. Daniel. I know, I'm sorry, Mom, I really am. He left shortly after, promising to talk to Emma and get to the bottom of things. I didn't have high hopes. People believe what they want to believe, and Daniel wanted to believe his wife was honest. I couldn't really blame him for that. It's painful to discover someone you love has been lying to you. 2 days later, Daniel called and asked if he could come over again. This time he sounded different, shaken. When he arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept. He sat at my kitchen table without being asked and started talking. Daniel. I confronted Emma with the phone records. At first, she stuck to her story, said you must have used a payphone or borrowed someone else's phone. But I kept pushing, kept asking questions, and eventually she broke down. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Patricia. What did she say? Daniel. She admitted she made the whole thing up. There was no call, no request for money, no $2,000. She said she did it because she felt like you judged her, like you thought she wasn't good enough for me because she came from money and didn't have to work the way you did. She said she wanted to make you look bad in my eyes, to prove you weren't as perfect as I always made you out to be. The confession should have made me feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. Sad for Daniel, who'd discovered his wife was capable of calculated cruelty. Sad for Emma, who was apparently so insecure she felt the need to tear down a woman who'd never done anything to her. And sad for myself, for all the time and energy I'd wasted trying to win over someone who'd decided to hate me from the start. Patricia. I'm sorry, Daniel. I know this must be hard for you. Daniel. Hard doesn't begin to cover it. I don't know who I married. The woman I thought I knew would never do something like this. She's been seeing a therapist, did I ever tell you that? For anxiety and self-esteem issues, but I never imagined she'd act out like this. That she'd try to damage your relationship with me just because she felt insecure. Patricia. What happens now? Daniel. I don't know. Emma's devastated. She keeps apologizing, saying she doesn't know what came over her, that she's never done anything like this before. She wants to apologize to you in person, to try to make things right. But honestly, Mom, I don't know if things can be made right. How do I trust her now? How do I know what's real and what's manipulation? I wanted to tell him to leave Emma, to get out of a marriage built on lies and insecurity. But I held my tongue. That wasn't my decision to make. Daniel was an adult. He needed to figure this out on his own. Patricia. I can't tell you what to do, sweetheart, but I will say this. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. Once it's broken, it takes a lot of work to rebuild it. Both people have to be committed to that work. Emma would need to be completely honest going forward, probably continue therapy, and really examine why she felt the need to lie in the first place. And you'd need to be willing to forgive her, which isn't easy after something like this. Daniel. Do you think you could forgive her? Patricia. I don't know. Maybe eventually. But Daniel, this isn't really about me forgiving Emma. It's about whether you can have a healthy marriage with someone who's capable of this level of deception. He nodded slowly, looking miserable. I made us tea and we sat together in silence for a while. It reminded me of when he was a little boy and he'd had a bad day at school. I couldn't fix his problems then either, but I could sit with him and let him know he wasn't alone. Daniel, I've been thinking about us too, Mom, about how I've treated you since I got married. I've been so focused on building this new life with Emma, on fitting into her world, that I've neglected you. I've taken you for granted. And when Emma told me that story about the money, part of why I believed her so easily was because I felt guilty. Like maybe you had asked for help and I'd been too absent to notice you needed it. Patricia. Daniel, I've never wanted you to feel guilty for being successful. I wanted this life for you. That was the whole point of all those sacrifices I made. Daniel. But I shouldn't have let success turn me into someone who sees his mother 3 times a year and schedules her in like a business meeting. You deserve better than that. You've always deserved better. Patricia. I appreciate you saying that, but you also need to live your own life. I don't expect you to call me every day or visit every week. You're busy, I understand that. I just need to know I still matter to you. That our relationship still has value. Daniel. You matter more than you know, Mom, and I'm gonna do better, I promise. We hugged before he left, and it felt different than our hugs had felt in recent years. Less perfunctory, more genuine, like maybe we were finding our way back to each other. Emma did eventually reach out to apologize. She called me 2 weeks later and asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious to hear what she had to say. We met at a small cafe near my apartment, neutral territory. Emma looked different. Smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked young and scared. Emma, thank you for meeting with me. I wasn't sure you would. Patricia. I almost didn't. But I figured I owed it to Daniel to at least hear you out. Emma. I owe you an enormous apology. What I did was cruel and unfair and completely unacceptable. There's no excuse for it. Patricia. Then why did you do it? She stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. Emma. Because I was jealous. Daniel talks about you constantly. How strong you are, how much you sacrificed for him, how everything he's achieved is because of you. And I kept thinking, what have I ever sacrificed? What have I ever really worked for? Everything in my life has been handed to me. My education, my connections, my money. None of it was earned the way you earned things. And I felt like no matter what I did, I'd never measure up to you in Daniel's eyes. Patricia. So you tried to tear me down instead of building yourself up. Emma. Yes. And I realize how pathetic that sounds. My therapist has been helping me work through these feelings of inadequacy. Apparently, I've spent my whole life feeling like I need to prove I'm more than just my parents' money. But I don't actually know how to do that. So instead, I lash out at people I perceive as threats. Patricia, I was never a threat to you, Emma. I wanted Daniel to be happy. If you made him happy, that was enough for me. Emma, I know that now, but I was so caught up in my own insecurities that I couldn't see it. I'm sorry, Patricia. Truly, deeply sorry. I understand if you can never forgive me. I looked at this young woman sitting across from me, so privileged and yet so troubled, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Patricia, I think you need to work on yourself, Emma. Figure out who you are outside of your parents' money and your husband's success. Find something that's yours, something you're passionate about, something that gives you purpose. Because tearing other people down to make yourself feel bigger isn't going to work long term. It'll just leave you emptier than before. Emma, you're right. I know you're right. I'm going to keep working with my therapist. And I'm going to try to figure out who Emma really is, underneath all the insecurity and privilege. Patricia, for what it's worth, I hope you do. Not just for Daniel's sake, but for yours. We didn't become best friends after that conversation. We probably never would. But there was a tentative peace between us, an acknowledgement that we both loved Daniel and wanted him to be happy. That was enough to build on, even if the foundation was shaky. The weeks that followed that coffee shop meeting were strange and tentative. Daniel kept me updated on what was happening with him and Emma, calling me more frequently than he had in years. Sometimes he'd call late at night after Emma had gone to bed, and we'd talk for an hour or more about everything that was happening. Daniel, the therapist asked me today why I was so quick to believe Emma over you. I didn't have a good answer, Mom. I kept trying to explain it, but everything I said just sounded like excuses. Patricia, what did you tell her? Daniel, that I guess I wanted to believe my marriage was perfect, that Emma was perfect, and if you were the one who'd made a mistake, who'd been dishonest, then that meant my life could stay exactly the way I thought it was. But if Emma was lying, then I had to face the fact that I didn't really know the person I married. That was scarier. Patricia, I understand that, sweetheart. It's human nature to avoid painful truths. Daniel, but you're my mother. You deserved better than that from me. You deserve to be believed, to be trusted. I'm so sorry, Mom. I keep saying it, but I don't know if you really understand how sorry I am. Patricia, I do understand. And Daniel, I forgive you. You made a mistake. You've acknowledged it, and you're working to do better. That's all any of us can do. Those late-night conversations brought us closer than we'd been in years. Daniel opened up to me in ways he hadn't since he was a teenager, sharing his fears and doubts, admitting that his perfect life wasn't quite as perfect as it looked from the outside. The pressure of running a hedge fund, the constant competition, the fear of failure, the way money changed relationships and made him question people's motives. He'd been carrying all of this alone, not wanting to burden me because he thought I wouldn't understand his world. Daniel, I thought if I told you about the stress, you'd think I was being ungrateful. After everything you sacrificed to give me opportunities, how could I complain that success was hard? Patricia, Daniel, your struggles are valid even if they're different from mine. I didn't sacrifice so you'd feel like you couldn't be honest with me about your life. I want to know what's really going on with you, not just the highlight reel. Daniel, I know that now. I think I've been performing for everyone for so long that I forgot how to just be myself. Even with Emma, especially with Emma. I felt like I had to be this perfect, successful husband, never showing weakness, never admitting when I was struggling. Patricia, and how did that work out? He laughed bitterly. Daniel, not great, as it turns out. The therapist says Emma and I were both so busy trying to be perfect for each other that we never actually let each other in. We built this beautiful, polished exterior, but there was nothing real underneath. Daniel and Emma went to couples therapy twice a week. He told me it was intense and painful and necessary. They had to work through layers of hurt and mistrust, had to learn how to communicate honestly, had to figure out if their marriage was worth saving. Some sessions were productive. Others ended with both of them in tears, questioning whether they should just give up. About 2 months after the revelation, Daniel called me sounding exhausted and defeated. Daniel, I don't know if we're going to make it, Mom. Every time I look at Emma, I remember that she lied to me, that she tried to damage my relationship with you. The therapist says I need to work on forgiveness. But how do you forgive something like that? Patricia. You do it one day at a time, sweetheart, and only if you really want to. You don't have to stay in a marriage that isn't working just because you feel like you should. Daniel. But I love her. Despite everything, I still love her. I just don't know if love is enough. Patricia. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Only you can figure out which one this is. Daniel. How did you do it, Mom? After Dad left, how did you move forward? I was surprised by the question. Daniel rarely asked about his father, who'd left when Daniel was 2 years old and never looked back. Patricia. Your father leaving was different. He made a choice to walk away from us, to start a new life without any responsibility to you. Emma made a terrible mistake, but she's here, trying to fix it. That counts for something. Daniel. Did you ever think about trying to get Dad back? To make it work for my sake? Patricia. For about 5 minutes. Then I realized that you deserved to grow up seeing a mother who respected herself, who didn't beg someone to love her. I wanted you to learn that you can't force relationships to work through sheer willpower. Sometimes people aren't right for each other, and that's okay. But Emma isn't your father, Daniel. She's not abandoning you. She's fighting to save your marriage. You need to decide if you want to fight for it too. He was quiet for a long moment. Daniel. I think I do. I'm just scared. Patricia. Being scared is normal. The question is whether you can move forward despite the fear. Around this time, I started seeing more of both Daniel and Emma individually. Emma would call and ask if we could meet for coffee, and slowly, painfully, we started building something that resembled a relationship. She told me about her childhood, growing up with parents who loved her but who were always busy with their own pursuits, leaving her largely in the care of nannies and housekeepers. Emma. I had everything except what I actually needed, which was parents who were present. Mom was always at some charity event, and Dad was always traveling for business. I learned early that the way to get their attention was to be perfect. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect everything. But it never felt like enough. Patricia. Is that why you felt like you had to compete with me? Because you thought Daniel loved me more? Emma. Partly. But it was more than that. You represent everything I'm not. You worked hard your whole life, made real sacrifices, earned everything you have. I've never earned anything. Everything was just given to me. And I think on some level I resented you for having a quality I'll never have, this authenticity that comes from struggle. So instead of admiring it, I tried to tear it down. Patricia. Emma, you can still earn things. You can still build a life that's based on your own choices and efforts. It's not too late. Emma. That's what my therapist keeps saying. She's helping me figure out who I am, separate from my parents' money and expectations, separate from Daniel's success. It's harder than I thought it would be. When you've always defined yourself by other people, finding your own identity feels impossible. Patricia. But you're doing it. That volunteer program at the museum, that's yours. You built that. Emma. I did, didn't I? The director offered me a paid position, actually. Not much money, but it would be my first real job. My parents think I'm insane for considering it. Why would I work when I don't have to? But I want to, Patricia. I want to know what it feels like to earn a paycheck, to be responsible for something that matters. Patricia. Then take the job. Your parents will adjust. Emma. Daniel's been supportive. He says he's proud of me for wanting to do this. I think he's relieved, actually. Like maybe if I have my own purpose, I'll stop obsessing over our relationship, stop needing constant validation from him. These conversations revealed a person I hadn't seen before. Emma wasn't just a spoiled rich girl who'd lied out of malice. She was a deeply insecure woman who'd never been taught how to value herself outside of her family name and her husband's accomplishments. I still didn't fully trust her, and I wasn't sure I ever would, but I was starting to understand her. Meanwhile, my relationship with Daniel continued to deepen. He started including me in his life in ways he hadn't in years. He'd invite me to his office to have lunch with him, showing me around, introducing me to his colleagues. He took me to a charity gala his fund was sponsoring, insisting I buy a proper dress for the occasion and refusing to let me pay for it. Patricia. Daniel, I don't need you to buy me things. Daniel. I know you don't need it, Mom, but I want to. Let me do this. Please. At the gala, surrounded by wealthy people in designer clothes, I expected to feel out of place the way I had at his wedding. But Daniel stayed by my side the entire night, his arm around my shoulders, introducing me to everyone as his mother with obvious pride. When people asked what I did, he'd jump in before I could answer. Daniel. My mom's a nurse. She's worked in the ICU at Metropolitan Hospital for 20 years. She's saved more lives than most people will ever touch. She's also the reason I'm standing here tonight. Everything I have, everything I've achieved, started with her believing in me when I was just a kid with big dreams. I cried in the taxi on the way home that night, overwhelmed by how publicly and enthusiastically he'd claimed me as his mother in front of his business associates and wealthy peers. There were still difficult moments, of course. One afternoon, about 4 months after the confrontation, I was at Daniel and Emma's apartment helping Emma cook dinner. Daniel was working late. Emma and I were chopping vegetables for a salad when she suddenly stopped and looked at me. Emma, can I ask you something? And will you promise to be honest? Patricia, of course. Emma, do you think I'm a bad person? I set down my knife and really looked at her. She was wearing an old t-shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup. She looked young and vulnerable. Patricia, no, Emma, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a person who did a bad thing. There's a difference. Emma, how can you even stand to be around me after what I did? Patricia, because I've watched you work to change. I've seen you go to therapy, be honest with Daniel about your issues, take responsibility for your actions. That takes courage. Bad people don't usually do that kind of work. Emma, I'm terrified Daniel's never going to forgive me. That one day he'll wake up and decide I'm not worth the effort. Patricia, if he was going to do that, he would have done it already. The fact that he's still here, still trying, means something. Emma, I know I don't deserve you being kind to me, but thank you for giving me another chance, for not poisoning Daniel against me, which you could have easily done. Patricia, I'm not kind to you for your sake, Emma. I'm kind to you for Daniel's sake. He loves you, and he's chosen to work on this marriage. The least I can do is support that choice, even if part of me wishes he'd walk away. Emma, you're honest. I appreciate that. Patricia, it's the only way I know how to be. We continued cooking in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence. Something had shifted between us in that moment of honesty. We might never be close, but we were learning how to coexist, how to both love Daniel without competing for his affection. The therapy seemed to be working for Daniel and Emma. Slowly, gradually, they were rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of honesty and vulnerability. Daniel told me that they'd started doing something their therapist recommended, something called transparency exercises, where they had to share one difficult truth with each other every day. Daniel, it's excruciating sometimes. Yesterday, Emma told me she resents how much time I spend at work and wishes I'd prioritize our relationship more. And I told her that sometimes I stay late at the office not because I have to, but because I'm avoiding coming home to the tension between us. Patricia, that must have been hard to hear for both of you. Daniel, it was. But the therapist says that's the point. We've been avoiding difficult conversations for our entire relationship. We've been so focused on appearing perfect that we never dealt with our actual problems. Now we're dealing with them, and it's messy and painful, but it's real. By the 6-month mark, I could see real changes in both of them. Daniel seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of constant performance. Emma had taken the job at the museum and threw herself into it with genuine passion, coming home excited to tell Daniel about the kids she was working with, the exhibitions she was planning. They'd started doing small, simple things together. Cooking dinner at home instead of eating at expensive restaurants, taking walks in Central Park on Sunday mornings, going to the movies and arguing good-naturedly about the plot afterwards. One Saturday, they invited me to join them for a day trip to a small town upstate, where Emma had heard about an art fair. We spent the afternoon wandering through booths of local artists, eating kettle corn, watching Emma get excited about a particular watercolor technique one artist was demonstrating. It was casual and easy, and felt like what a family should feel like. On the drive back to the city, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, and Daniel and I talked quietly so we wouldn't wake her. Daniel, I think we're going to make it, Mom. I really do. Patricia, I'm glad, sweetheart. You both deserve to be happy. Daniel, I was thinking the other day about that Mother's Day, about Emma's lie and how it all fell apart. And as terrible as it was, I'm almost grateful it happened. We never would have dealt with our real problems if we hadn't been forced to. We would have just kept pretending everything was fine until one day we woke up and realized we were strangers living in the same apartment. Patricia. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the most important changes. Daniel. I've been thinking about something else too. About how I treated you before all this happened. How I let you become an afterthought in my life. That stops now, Mom. You're not an obligation I fit into my schedule when it's convenient. You're my mother, and you deserve to be a priority. Patricia. Daniel, I never expected you to put your life on hold for me. Daniel. I'm not putting my life on hold. I'm making room for the people who matter. There's a difference. It took months, but gradually Daniel started to seem more like himself again. Less tense, less conflicted. He started calling me more regularly, not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. He'd stop by my apartment after work sometimes, bringing takeout, and we'd eat together and talk about everything and nothing. One evening, about 6 months after the disastrous Mother's Day brunch, Daniel showed up with Emma. I was surprised to see her, but I invited them both in. Emma had brought flowers, simple daisies, and she smiled nervously as she handed them to me. Emma. I know these are your favorites, Daniel told me. Patricia. They are. Thank you, Emma. That's very thoughtful. We had dinner together, the three of us, and it was surprisingly comfortable. Emma asked me about my work, really asked, and actually listened to my answers. She told me about a volunteer program she'd started at a local art museum, teaching underprivileged kids about art history. Her face lit up when she talked about it, and I could see genuine passion there. Emma. The kids are amazing, so curious and creative. Last week, one of them asked me if Picasso was sad when he painted with so much blue. It was such an innocent question, but it made me think about art in a completely different way. Patricia. That sounds wonderful, Emma. I'm glad you found something you're passionate about. Emma. I am too. It's the first time I've felt like I'm doing something that matters, something that's making a real difference. Thank you for suggesting I find my purpose. You were right. After dinner, Emma excused herself to take a phone call, leaving Daniel and me alone in the kitchen while I made coffee. Daniel. Things are better, Mom. Not perfect, but better. Emma's really working on herself, and I'm working on being a better husband, a better son, too. Patricia. I can see that. I'm proud of you, Daniel. It takes courage to face problems instead of running from them. Daniel. I learned that from you. You never ran from anything, even when things were hard. Even when raising me on your own must have felt impossible sometimes. Patricia. You were never impossible, sweetheart. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Daniel. I want you to know something. I've been thinking a lot about the choices I've made, about how I let work and money and Emma's world become more important than my relationship with you. That stops now. You're my mother. You're the person who believed in me when I was just a kid with big dreams and no resources. I'm never going to take that for granted again. Patricia. I appreciate that, Daniel, more than you know. Emma came back in and we all sat together in my small living room, drinking coffee and talking. It wasn't perfect. There was still some tension, still some hurt that hadn't fully healed. But it was real, honest, and that felt like progress. Looking back now, that terrible Mother's Day was probably the best thing that could have happened to us, as strange as that sounds. It forced everything into the open. It made us confront the cracks in our relationships that we'd all been pretending didn't exist. Emma's lie was the catalyst that made Daniel and me really examine how disconnected we'd become. It made Emma face her insecurities instead of projecting them onto others. It made all three of us do the hard work of figuring out how to have authentic relationships with each other. I learned things too. I learned that sacrifice, while noble, can sometimes breed resentment if you're not careful. I'd spent so many years defining myself solely as Daniel's mother, the woman who gave up everything for her son, that I'd forgotten to build a life that was just for me. After everything that happened, I started doing things I'd always wanted to do, but never made time for. I joined a book club at my local library. I started taking an art class on Tuesday evenings. I made friends outside of work, people who knew me as Patricia, not just as Daniel's mom or the nurse from the ICU. I also learned that love isn't about being believed without question. Real love means sometimes having hard conversations, asking difficult questions, and not always taking the easy path. Daniel loving me didn't mean he had to automatically take my side in every conflict. but it did mean he needed to investigate the truth instead of making assumptions. That was the lesson he learned too, the hard way. As for Emma, she learned that privilege doesn't exempt you from having to do the work of becoming a whole person. She's still working on that. Some days are better than others. But she's trying, genuinely trying, and that counts for something. Last Mother's Day, we all had brunch together again. This time at my apartment. Emma helped me cook, and we laughed when the hollandaise sauce broke and we had to start over. Daniel set the table with my mismatched dishes and secondhand silverware, and didn't seem to care that it wasn't fancy. We ate and talked, and it felt easy in a way it never had before. At one point, Emma raised her glass of orange juice. Emma, I'd like to make a toast. To Patricia, who taught me that being strong doesn't mean you never need help, and that being honest is more important than being liked. Thank you for giving me a second chance I didn't deserve. Patricia, we all deserve second chances, Emma. That's what family is for. Daniel squeezed my hand and smiled. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Complete. Not because my son had achieved great success, or because his marriage was working out, or because Emma had apologized, but because we were all there, together, being real with each other. No lies, no pretenses, no performances. Just three people who loved each other, flaws and all, trying their best to figure out how to be a family. The journey from that terrible Mother's Day to this one wasn't easy. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when I wondered if things would ever really be okay again. But we kept showing up for each other. We kept being honest, even when honesty was uncomfortable. We kept trying. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Not the money or the success or the perfect family dinners. Just the willingness to keep trying, to keep loving, to keep believing that people can change and relationships can heal. It's messy and complicated and nothing like the simple dreams I had when I first held my newborn son in my arms 32 years ago. But it's real. And real, I've discovered, is so much better than perfect. These days, Daniel calls me twice a week, sometimes more. Not because he feels obligated, but because we're friends now in addition to being mother and son. Emma and I have coffee once a month, and while we'll probably never be close the way some mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law are, we've found a respectful affection for each other. She tells me about the kids in her art program, and I tell her about my patients. We're building something, slowly and carefully. I still work at the hospital, though I've cut back to regular shifts instead of doubles. My apartment is still small, and my furniture is still secondhand, but I've hung some of the paintings I made in my art class on the walls. They're not very good, technically speaking, but they're mine. They represent something I'm doing just for myself, and that feels important. Daniel has talked about buying me a bigger place, somewhere nicer, but I've declined. This apartment has been my home for 20 years. It's where I raised my son, where I learned to be independent, where I figured out who Patricia was outside of being a mother. I'm not ready to leave it, and Daniel understands that now. He doesn't see it as me being stubborn or proud. He sees it as me making a choice about what I want, and he respects that. The other day, a young nurse at the hospital asked me about my son. She'd seen his name in some business magazine and made the connection. Young nurse. Your son is Daniel Morrison, the hedge fund guy? That's so impressive. Patricia. Yes, Daniel's done very well for himself. I'm proud of him. Young nurse. You must feel like all your hard work paid off. I thought about that for a moment before responding. Patricia. The hard work was worth it, but not just because Daniel became successful. It was worth it because I raised a good man who's learning how to have honest relationships and face his mistakes. That's the real achievement. The young nurse looked a bit confused by my answer, but that was okay. She'd understand someday, when she had her own children and realized that success isn't measured in dollars or prestigious jobs. It's measured in character and connection, and the courage to keep growing even when growth is painful. I think back sometimes to that moment at the Mother's Day brunch when Daniel asked if I'd thanked Emma for the money. The question that changed everything. At the time, it felt like my world was falling apart. But really, it was just falling into a new configuration. One that was more honest, more authentic, more real. Sometimes things have to break before they can be rebuilt properly. That's what happened with us. We broke, and then we did the hard work of putting ourselves back together. This time with a foundation built on truth instead of assumptions. It's not the fairy tale ending I might have imagined when Daniel was young, but it's real, and it's ours, and it's enough. More than enough. It's everything. And on quiet evenings when I'm sitting in my apartment, looking at my amateur paintings on the walls and thinking about the book club meeting I have tomorrow, and the coffee date with Emma next week, and the phone call from Daniel that'll probably come while I'm making dinner, I feel something I didn't expect to feel at this point in my life. I feel content. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is real. And real, I've learned, is the greatest gift of all.